Welcome all. This is Debbie Mayberry from National Kitchen and Bath Association. You're here for our fourth webinar of the month called Color Cues, Its Impact in Our Lives with Paula Kennedy. She's a certified master kitchen and bath designer. She's CLIP certified as well as holds a color certification. And we want to generously thank Amarok for their sponsorship, for all of our webinars for this month. And I have Peter Wells with us. He's representing Amarok. He's the senior principal designer with that organization. And Peter, if you're there, we're ready to hear a few words from you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Debbie, and thank you, Paula. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining NKBA's webinar series in today's session. I'm happy to be here on behalf of Amarok to thank you for participating. A little bit about Amarok, if you're not familiar with us. For over 90 years, Amarok has been dedicated to bringing you the latest in kitchen and bath decorative hardware that is very trendy, stylish, and unique, offering the latest finishes and merchandising tools to support your design selection needs. And we're very much involved in the kitchen and bath industry through NKBA Association and others, and we're very happy to sponsor this month's webinar series. We believe continuing education is an important part for all of us to not only get educated, but to get energized, to do what we all love to do every day. So after the CEU webinar, take the time to get to know us. We're located at amarok.com. And most social networking outlets like Pinterest, House, Instagram, and Facebook. We're also included in interior design software like 2020 and Envision for designers and builders. Or you can reach out to our customer care team, which Debbie will provide an email for after this webinar. So thank you and enjoy.
Thank you, Peter. And Paula, we are ready to get started. If you're there, please. Paula, are you there? Okay.
Good morning and good afternoon, depending on which coast you're on. Thank you, Debbie, so much for all your support within KBA for doing these webinars. It sure makes it go smooth and easy. And thank you, NKBA, for the opportunity to share what I'm passionate about. And Peter, thank you so much for being here this morning and all month for June, and Amarok for sponsoring this month. We wouldn't be here without all of our partners in the industry. And so we really appreciate this opportunity for designers and other non-designers that are on this call today, the opportunity to learn from each other. So yes, thank you for the introduction. I will tell you what that other set of letters is. It's a certified architectural color consultant, and I will be going a little bit more into that. Today, color cues. I've been passionate about color for a long time. Hopefully some of you attended the first color session this month with Rachel with appliances. Oh, wasn't that just inspiring and fun? I loved listening to her. Great personality and delivery, and just all the color with appliances just totally got my inspiration going. So today I really want to talk about delving deeper into color theory and color, kind of what makes up color and why and how it impacts our lives. And I'm also going to here's what we're talking about today. I'm also going to touch on, of course, psychology and some of the human factor and the science. And we're going to wrap up the second half of this talking about who we are as colorists and specifications in this industry for interior design and kitchen and bath, and taking a holistic approach to all of our color selections. And of course, then we will wrap up, because I think it's really important to understand how does the paint industry blend and meld into as an integral part of the color topic. And I will touch on consultants as a colorist and also as kitchen and bath designers. We actually are all color consultants. We're not just doing paint or not just doing colors. And I will give you some resources and references for if you want to take the next step and maybe add this layer of education or even certification to your career. So this is in no particular order, my little list here today. But to get started, this is one. Also, Debbie said we are recording the session, and I just want you to know that, remember that we are recording the audio, and I welcome any of you to take a screenshot of the PowerPoints today as we go, because the recording that you'll hear, if you want to, get some information, go back, refer back to it, is just audio. Does not show the slides. So please do take screenshots today. We're all in this together, and I'm all about, sharing what I've learned with everyone else. So, okay.
Let me interrupt you. Excuse me. It's Deb. So actually, this whole thing is being recorded, so it's not just audio; it is visuals as well. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Debbie. I misunderstood that last time we talked. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Well, there you go. You can always refer back to the slide deck as well. All right. So this first note about color, this first slide about color, is probably the fundamental part that I really want you all to get. Color is the reaction that light is having to another object, or within a space. Without light, there is no color. The type and amount of light affects the perception of that color. So color is the reaction with light. So let's remember that as we go through the next hour today. So we have color everywhere in our lives, don't we? And they cue us. They cue us for, starting and stopping and slowing down. And now, of course, we are beginning to see more color cues for temperature in the home as well. And, we've seen for years, hot and cold handles with the words hot, and maybe there's a red or a blue mark. But now we're seeing the lighting cues from outdoors with color, and we have seasonal cues. And it's interesting because depending on what season we're in and what part of the country you are in, our colors are a little bit different on the outside, and they cue us to different seasons that we're in. So color, I believe, is one of the most, if not the most powerful design tools that we have in our toolbox as designers. And what I want you to really get through this is that no color is inherently wrong. Its amount and intensity or how we use it might not be the right use for that space or for the light of that space. But there's so much that we have control over, with whether it's the shade of the color or the lighting or what we pair that color with. We have a lot of control with how that color works. I love starting out as I do a new topic because I'm always kind of researching something that I'm passionate about, and I like going back to history and kind of where we started. And I loved seeing where we've used color in architecture, through history of architecture and design, and even tribal and clothing dye. And I grew up here in the Pacific Northwest, where I really connected to Native Americans and their color and whatnot. And years ago, when I got to travel to Italy and seeing all the buildings that are still standing, but they're bare, right? They're white marble or they're limestone. But then we've unearthed and discovered, no, they weren't white. They were very intricately and vividly painted. And so I love seeing all of that from our history. I get a lot of color, like I said, from nature, and I've even, from one beach combing trip that I did, brought a bunch of color palette back from the beach for a client, and so I do utilize that a lot. But they really started, and this is still a little bit of the history from the natural pigments that were found and developed over the years. They were actually semi-transparent from nature. They're not quite as opaque. Today, with the oxides in there and the bases that we mix with the tints, they're not as transparent now as they used to be. So many of us are learning and hearing the term wellness design. I was more introduced to it last year and then have been doing a deep dive into it. Yes, there's probably another set of letters coming after my name next year, hopefully for wellness. But biophilia, again, I've been touching already about color from nature. I was in the Caribbean last winter and got to see the incredible blues and that aqua color, in person, and it's just stunning, and it's really hard to explain it and describe it. But the colors we see there in nature, in the water and the rocks and whatnot, it is beautiful. And I think that if we're ever stuck on a project, I think it's really beautiful to maybe just step outside for a little inspiration. And yes, we can bring these colors inside on the walls or on the materials that we choose, can't we? If that wall, I had an office that was just about that blue in the water. It was actually Sherwin-Williams Belize. I had an office painted that color. And we'll talk about psychology here in a little bit, but the blue was enough, it was enough blue in it to be calming and relaxing, but there was enough yellow undertone to be energetic, because we don't want to be falling asleep in our offices, right? We want to have some energy and be able to focus. So for me, it was just the perfect shade for not getting stressed out, but being productive. Well, let's dig in. Now, I bet there's a fair amount of you sitting on this call today that, if you went to design school, you probably had a Color 101 class at school. And even since graduating and being in this industry, there have been some good Color 101 classes, that we've gotten to attend. I know I've certainly attended a few within KBA and in the industry. But so we're going to touch on some of those 101 applications and go a little bit deeper. Starting out, though, back in the late 1660s, Sir Isaac Newton, here he is at it again, really kind of discovered this, celebrated phenomenon of color with light, and that white light, the sunlight, refracting through a prism, creating this rainbow. And so some of you are familiar probably with this Roy G. Biv, the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet that he discovered with that light going through that prism, which really then started our understanding of color and really deepened that research into color. And again, remember, color is reaction that light's having to the object. What they found was that all of these colors, and I believe this is important to talk about even before we get into the psychology, what I found fascinating was each of these are wavelengths. Each of these colors are wavelengths, and that are reacting differently in the electromagnetic spectrum. And what I loved seeing was that they have different energy, that lowest energy being red, which before doing my research here and learning about this, I probably would have thought it was a high energy. It's actually a low energy, and then increasing through that rainbow there up to a higher energy of violet. And I do believe that does affect us, and that's part of what affects us as we get into talking about the psychology of color and how color makes us feel. How does the human element come into this, though? How do we translate all this information that's around us in our world? Well, again, we get to dive in and do a little more research on how we function, right? So I've got, and the next slide it's a great slide, and I'll explain this a little bit better. In your eye, you have two things that are super important, lots of things, but two in particular. You have rods and you have cones. The rods see value, the black and whites, the scale of black and whites. The cones see color, and they specifically are created to see red, green, and blue. Here is a great image to help you understand this. There's our little red, green, and blue cones, and the rod that sees the gray and the blacks, black and whites. So we translate, these rods and cones translate what that light is refracting off of an object into our brain, telling us what color it is or showing us what color it is. So I just think this is fascinating. You know, if there isn't light, is there color? If we didn't have these cones and cell, is there actually color? We won't go too down into those weeds, though, today. So now that we understand a little bit more about how the eye works and how light creates and reacts with objects to create that color, there's some other layers now. As we are working with clients, you know, and Debbie talked about the universal design and one of the certifications. I'm sure there's many of you out there that have CAPS or CLIP or work with a lot with clients with universal design. We all know everybody's a little different, right? Everyone is different, and we all see differently. Now, traditionally, and I won't say always or all or nothing, right? Because that's never going to be true. Somebody will be like, yeah, no, that's not true. So, but traditionally, women do tend to see more nuances in colors than men do, and I'm sure there's plenty of men on this call today that would refute that. And like I said, it's not all or nothing, but generally that tends to be true. Now, color blindness is also something that affects us and our clients as we're working with them. Approximately 1 in 12 men and 1 in 200 women in the world do have some type of color blindness. Now, my father definitely had that, and with the greens and the reds. Now, he learned to compensate because he did a fair amount of, you know, artistic work and creativity, and even, you know, he was a builder as well, but he did help his clients pick out some colors. I'm like, how do you do that if you're colorblind? Well, he learned to compensate, and he always got really pretty close. I was impressed. But so when your clients say, okay, I want seafoam green for this bathroom for the kids, are they really saying seafoam green? Or you just, so let's say we go out and we pick a whole palette, like, oh, okay, that'll be beautiful, that'll be fun. We go pick out a whole palette of materials for this bathroom, and we come back to them and they're thinking, no, that's not it. That's not what I meant. They were thinking turquoise. So we need to be really careful as we're working with clients in retranslating and understanding and defining exactly what each other is saying and just confirming. So when you say seafoam green, do you mean this? And they'll be, oh, no, I mean something darker or whatnot, right? So even on that first meeting, I always have my paint samples with me so that I can do some of that preliminary clarification. Now, also with aging, within universal design, of course, we have our aging in place, category within that. My eyes are even aging as I'm hitting 50. But my grandmother used to, and I don't know what age she was when she did this, but she did a remodel just for interior design, you know, paint and carpet and whatnot. And it was so bright. It must have been back in the 80s. So it was this red and orange kind of short shag kind of carpet. That'll date it. But it was so bright and vivid, and we all just kind of thought she was crazy. But and then all of her clothing, her wardrobe, kept getting brighter and brighter and brighter. Well, as we age, our eyes change and it yellows, right? So she wanted to see more bright colors. And so she had to buy brighter colors to be able to see that brightness, right? Well, later on, then, of course, we understood that. So, again, you know, you just know your client. You got to know your client as you're going into a project, as you're, you know, picking everything out. Because we can't just pick out color and paint without knowing who our clients are. Now, let's get back to some of what really helps us understand color and the organization of how we treat and work with color. So most of you, I would assume, are really familiar with the hue, value, and chroma. These are the phrases you're going to hear a few times today, and you've probably heard before. So hue is the color of the family. It's the primary on the outside of the color wheel, the primary, most true color of the color wheel. The value is the lightness or darkness of that color. And the chroma really is all about the strength or the weakness of that color. And if you remember back as I was talking about how our eye sees color, those cones see the hue, that red, blue, green. Was it red, blue, green? Yeah. And the rods see the black to the white. Now, years ago, I had the traditional color wheel in my, in my bag from the design school, and I kept it in my bag of colors. But it was a one-dimensional tool. And as a creative, and I know I'm speaking to my peers out here, and many of us are really right-brained, and I always had a hard time kind of like, okay, I understand how this works, but when I saw this on a presentation last year in a three-dimensional system, it really helped me wrap my brain around the entire concept of the Munsell color space. And I'm really grateful that, that Munsell had the process down to organize this into something that we can actually dissect and use. Now, the Munsell color wheel only divided into 10, and there are other color wheels that go down all the way up to 12. So this example really helps me. So let's look again at the outside. So we have hue, our main colors on the outside of the ring here. Chroma, our value, is it moving up and down on this rod from black to white. And the chroma is from the outside of the hue all the way into wherever we're sitting on that value. Now, hopefully there are some light bulbs going on out there, and that I'm not the only one that had the light bulb when I saw it in this 3D application that just made so much more sense to me for understanding how the color wheel worked. Remember I said there's a 10 hue color wheel. Now this one is a 12, and we're going to kind of work off of the 12 color wheel system here for a little while. So most of us are familiar, and if not, hey, this is a great recap, isn't it? We have our primary colors, red, blue, yellow, our secondary, the purple, orange, and green, and our tertiary are the ones in the middle. We also break the color wheel down into warm colors and cool, and I definitely credit the last two slides to Benjamin Moore for their graphics here. I definitely want to give them a shout out. I could not have recreated these on my own. They were beautiful, and I was given permission to use these. We break these up into cool and warm hues, and that is important to understand because they affect us differently. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later as well. Down at the bottom of the slide here, warm colors are advancing colors, and cool colors are receding colors. And I'm going to talk about that near the end. We also play a lot with tint, tone, and shade as well, and that has a lot to do with where we are on the value scale. But let's go on and talk about some examples, because I want to give you some inspiration today too. So we'll show you some examples of the color wheel, but what does that look like in real life? So this first one, the complementary color selection, where we have the violet, the purple, blue, and the yellow. This couch and art and the rug combination is a fantastic example, and you will see that I pull a lot from fashion as well. I love watching fashion and what's going on in the world out there that eventually trickles down into the home, doesn't it? So this is a very dynamic color palette. Very dynamic. So if you're looking for something, you've got a client who's, willing to go a little beyond, no matter where you do the complementary on this color wheel, you should be able to come up with a beautiful complementary dynamic there. Our split complementary, are any two colors located opposite of each other, as in our traditional green and red, right? It's hard not to think about Christmas in these, but they're actually beautifully executed here in a way that does not seem holiday-ish to those of us here who celebrate the holidays here. These colors really enhance each other and produce a bold, vibrant effect. A triadic can be really fun. So this particular one, we kind of stick with the basics, the red, blue, yellow. Look at that fun kitchen with our red small appliances and the yellow wall. And then this outfit was very bright and vivid, really can be a lot of fun. Now, it also depends on where you're at on the value scale. You could tone these colors down. Like obviously the fashion shot here is a more vivid, high value, and the cabinets and that wall paint are a little bit more on the lower or the lighter scale. They've been lightened up, haven't they? Analogous. That one's always fun to say. Three colors that are neighbors, that are adjacent to each other. This middle image is really a great example of this with pulling in, the oranges and the orange yellow and the yellow even in the accessories and how well they blend together. It really was a lot of fun going out and finding examples of these color applications. It can appear to be more of a monochromatic, but offers some more contrast, which is really nice, and kind of takes a monochromatic, which is where we're at here, monochromatic. With blue, of course, blue is still trending pretty well right now. I really did kind of steer clear of talking about trends because they come and go so fast, don't they? And I know many of you have sat in on plenty of color trend reports through the year. So there was so many other things for us to talk about. I didn't want to take up too much time talking about trends today. So monochromatic uses different tints and shades. So we're not limited to one color, one value, one hue. We have a lot to play with within that one color palette. With the shades and tints and whatnot. So it can still be incredibly vibrant, but really creates a harmonious aesthetic. Now, kind of getting back to the values, from the black to the white, and of course we have our grays, really is the degree of lightness from the top to the bottom. We often consider these our neutral color palettes as we get closer in, and this can be true of any of our other colors. The closer we get in to the center on that chroma in towards the value scale, we really do start getting into the neutrals through the middle of that diagram that we showed, that 3D Munsell system. Then again, it's just like a lot like the monochromatic palette. We have a lot to play with within this, the intensity and the saturation. Achromatic, so much drama here, isn't it? Achromatic. We often kind of think of achromatic as in no color. So this is a beautiful combination with the black and white. It took me a little bit to find this kitchen as an example because many of us, especially in the Northwest, I'll blame us for this, we love our hardwood floors. A little bit warmer on our feet here in the cooler temperatures. But to find a hardwood floor that fit within the achromatic scheme can be challenging because there's so many undertones with wood, which we'll talk about at the end. But this floor really worked with it. Now, I was at KBIS And I know I just said I wasn't going to touch too much on trends, but I couldn't help this. We just saw this at KBiz last year. I was just surrounded and attracted to all of the black and white that I saw. And so I came home and kind of did a little bit more research. I'm like, is this a thing that I totally missed the boat on, that I didn't see? And sure enough, it is. And I think we are attracted to that clean. There's still some drama, but it can be either whether it's contemporary or traditional. There's something really clean and attractive about this. Monochromatic versus achromatic. The image on the left is a beautiful monochromatic using the gray scales and playing with that. I think if they had done a hardwood floor here, it could have been challenging unless they found one with more of a gray undertone for it. And our traditional black and white on the right, achromatic, using our neutral colors. Now we get into some interesting scenarios as we play with color. So I bet there are many of you on the call today that have brought color samples back to your home or to clients' homes, and it looks totally different in person than it does at the showroom or when you first pick the color out, right? We have to remember we can't pick out color in a vacuum, and we've talked about this. We talked about, you know, your clients, what their age and their visibility and the lighting, everything comes into play when we talk about color. So in this middle section here, the gray boxes with the blue in the middle, that's where the blue should look within that gray. And then we see the hue with the blue on the left and that violet or fuchsia on the right. You can see how it starts to change what that small blue box looks like. The colors that surround it affect how it looks. Well, does it affect how it looks, or really is it affecting how our brain is interpreting how it looks, right? The middle section here with value, that same blue box, actually looks a lot brighter with the white surround and just doesn't look as dramatic surrounded by the black. Same here with the chroma, putting different colors around it really starts to affect that color, doesn't it? And it's important for us to know this as designers. So here's the next 3 slides are kind of something for you to, I didn't set up like a poll or a question answer for you to respond, but just do this at home on your own. This is just a little test for you to kind of see, are these center blue boxes the same or are they different? Take a good look at these for a second. Are the center blue boxes the same or are they different? In this scenario, they are actually the same color. The 2 middle boxes are the same color, and you can see how they are changed, whether they are surrounded by a yellow undertone color or a cool blue undertone color. So what do you think about these 2? The 2 center purplish smaller boxes, do they look the same or do they look different? Sorry, the question you want to be answering is, you know, do you think that those are the same color or not? In this case, those 2 center boxes are actually different colors. But surrounded by those the 2 colors above really caused them to look a lot more alike than what they really were. Okay, our last one. The center gray boxes, are they the same or are they different? In this case, they are actually the same, and they're just affected by what color or the intensity of the color that surrounds them. So let's move from there. And we understand a little bit more how color that's paired with color affects each other, right? We can't talk about color without talking about light. We started that off on slide 1. We cannot select colors for our clients without considering their light sources of their home. What region do they live in? What direction do their windows face? Now, I know many of you, like myself, we have some fantastic lighting classes that we can take with members of NKBA and in our industry. And hopefully you have been spending a lot of time learning about light, and so you know the differences that light can cause on the colors that we select. This is a great slide that really shows, and this may be one that you've seen before, where direct sunlight can have this kind of perfect balance of warm and cool, again, depending on what time of the day. That indirect sunlight, which is really inconsistent throughout the day, and artificial light. And again, whether it is an incandescent or an LED, right? So CCT, this may be familiar to some of you, correlated color temperature. Now, if you're trying to pick out, let's look at the center image. If you're trying to look for your client kind of a, let's call this kind of a warm gray color palette with a cool white temperature bulb, this is what you want it to look like. But what if they get home and they change things up and they put a different light bulb in that lamp? And now all of a sudden it has this warm cast to it. Or during the bright day, it is a lot more gray, and you are going to get a phone call that says, hey, this is the wrong color. So when I'm not ready to go to that yet. When I pick out samples and tile, I always get a second set so that my clients can take them home for the weekend. I want them to sit with those colors in their home for 3 or 4 days, move the color palette around to different windows, different rooms, and especially if it's a color that's going to go throughout the entire house, of course. If it is just the kitchen, obviously, you know, you're working just in that kitchen family room area, if that's what the scenario is, right? If it's in the bathroom, what types of light are you? Let's say there's no windows, unfortunately, hopefully there is, but you need to live with those samples in the home to find out what type of light, how they're going to look under different lights. It's incredibly important. Now, metamerism. Now, this is something that I did not get in some traditional, when I went to the design school, I did not understand metamerism, and there's some things that I didn't understand, which really I kind of consider beyond Color 101, that I learned when I went and got certified, and with Teresa with Business of Color. But metamerism, this is something that occurs, like I just took you through that little test, right? When the colors change, when they're viewed under different light sources, and or I think the test that you just went through is more about the color that's surrounding them. So that's a little bit different than this, sorry. This is more about the light, how colors change under light. So you can take a paint sample or tile sample or whatnot into different lights, and they will look different. Now, I teach here locally at Seattle, an interior design school, and I have a lighting expert come in, and I have either Benjamin Moore or Sherwin Williams come in and work with the students. We have 4 different types of lighting, and we also have daylight. And we have the students take their material samples and test. They pick out their paint colors to go with their colors, their materials, and then they go to the different light sources to understand how metamerism works. And you can see, this really wasn't a pun, but the light bulbs come on, you know, as they see the aha moments, let's call it that, as they understand, wow, okay. And the colors that are most affected by metamerism is tan, taupe, gray, and yellow. These are some of the hardest ones that are most prone to the metameric effect. One more shot here about lighting with the CRI, your color rendering index. Now, I know many grocery stores in their produce department, they understand this really, really well, don't they? They know how to make that produce look delicious, So we need to keep that in mind as we're picking our lighting. So let's move on. Let's move on from lighting. You know, there are a lot of different things that affect light or color as we select color, whether it's what we grew up with, cultural, society. There are some different religious practices that touch in with color. I know like the chakras all have a color that goes with it, and of course feng shui. There's a designer here in Seattle that specializes in that, and I think it's a beautiful practice. With bringing that into the home, using it as interior design. But here, psychology. Now you could do a whole class just on psychology. Now specifically today, I am going to zero in on the North American culture. Now we know culture can really have a huge effect on different colors and their meanings in different parts of the world. But they really do affect us emotionally and physical and behavioral. You know, that blue that I chose for my office, and even now, even back when we looked at how the light refracted through the prism and the different wavelengths, those wavelengths do affect us. This is something that I kind of keep in my toolbox. Just a great snapshot that I can refer back to as I need to. And we're going to delve more into these. So red, let's start with our lovely, beautiful red. I hope that some of you, like I've said a few times, I do keep an eye on what's going on in fashion. I also keep an eye on the auto industry. I think both of those are great to understand as we look at our interior environments. So red, obviously, we're very familiar with, okay, it's the color of passion and intense emotions. I love seeing how it's used throughout different industries, not just interior. In marketing, increases our heart rate. Restaurants, this is interesting. Well, most of us, this is probably not new. Restaurants use red to stimulate the appetite. And I've heard there's others that like to have red in our kitchens. And, you know, since we've been staying at home lately, I don't know that I want red in my kitchen. I might need blue. I don't think I need my appetite stimulated right now. And you can see it's also the color of the root chakra and all the logos here below that have utilized red. Orange, now pink has always been one of my favorite colors. Orange is kind of a close second. For me, orange is a very energizing color. I can't tell you how much of my activewear is orange, and it kind of inspires me and motivates me. It's the color of sunsets. In marketing, it can signify aggression. I'm not sure. Not sure how that plays out. I really kind of think of it more. They're also utilizing it in founding in impulsive shoppers. I'll have to start taking a look at what I'm buying. For the chakra, it's the sacral chakra, and it definitely shows warmth, and it can be one of our caution signs as well. Yellow, of course, always makes me smile, as it should. Increases cheerfulness and warmth. Now, too much of a good thing can cause some fatigue and strain on the eyes. Makes babies cry. Now, interesting, as I grew up, my room was pink and my sister's was yellow. And now learning more about, you know, is yellow something that we really should have? I think maybe we should have calming colors in our kids' and babies' rooms. Yellow is maybe a little bit too much energy if you want to sleep really well. So it's a very energizing color. So I don't know that it's as conducive for sleeping. In the marketing world, it represents optimism and youthfulness. Grabs attention, doesn't it? And green. I couldn't do green without having my favorite Starbucks logo, a recycling logo. Health and tranquility. Now, as we're beginning to understand biophilia and bringing nature from outside in, this is a beautiful color to bring in, whether it's in wallpapers or paints or materials that kind of symbolizes nature and bringing that into the home. It symbolizes money. In marketing and in stores, it's used for relaxing. The heart chakra. And let's all just go for a drive in that car, huh? All right, blue. Blue just always makes me go, ah. And it should. It's kind of associated with peace and with water, again, nature, representing calmness and serenity, and kind of just going back to that office color I had. Like I needed something that was a little bit more calm, but with that yellow undertone for just a little bit of energy, just enough energy. But this just kind of does make me, you know, also I've understood that blue really creates a sense of trust. And so I do think that there's a lot of brands that have chosen blue for that reason. And it's the throat chakra for expression, especially even true like communication and expression. And our last one, purple. Now, we've seen purple in history really denoting royalty and wealth and success. It's really, I think, a more complex color. It is the crown chakra, Yahoo, sci-fi. Interesting to see the logos here that are used as well. In marketing, often used for beauty or anti-aging products. Interesting. Used to soothe or calm. So there's enough blue in it. There's enough blue in it that is soothing and calming, but there's also enough red in it for that vibrancy and a little bit of that passion mixed into it. So let's delve into the paint industry. We can't talk about color consulting and color without talking about the paint industry. And this is where I really learned an enormous amount when I did my color certification classes and education, was really understanding how the paint industry works with all this. Now, specifically, of course, we're talking about the architectural paint world. We're not talking about digital marketing or digital media or, you know, other marketing methods or color use. The architectural paint tints that are used in the paint industry, there are 12, and almost all, if not all, paint companies use the same paint tints. So all of those hundreds and thousands of colors that you see out there are all created by using these paint tints. Now, during the class, the certification class that I was in, I got to play with these tints, and I got to see how they worked. And the instructor would show us a color, and she's like, okay, using these tints, match that color. And it was fascinating that to create blue, we actually didn't use the blue tint. It actually didn't have any blue in it at all, and how many colors it took to create that color and play with that. It really just changed my life and changed how I worked with and how I see color. Now, this is just a snapshot of some of the quality luxury manufacturers that are common in our industry. Of course, I have spent my fair share of time at Home Depot as well with my own homes, but paint is all over the spectrum. But this is really that middle to high end quality of paint companies, and there are many, many more, of course. And real briefly, components of paint. We have pigments, binders, resins, and solvents, all that help make it easy to apply to the wall and how it's going to cover the wall and cover mistakes in the wall too. Full spectrum paint. We can't talk about paint without talking about full spectrum colors. My first experience was with Divine Color, Faro and Ball, of course, some of us are familiar with, also Benjamin Moore's Aura. And the difference with these are really complex colors. And they are using 7 to 12 different pigments and never using black. Most paint colors are using only 2 to 4 colors, and they will include black. So it's a very complex paint, and there's a kind of a whole other learning curve in working with those, but they're beautiful. Now, most of us are really familiar with the different sheens that we need in the different rooms. And this is important because we really do need to understand how the light, again, even is reflecting with the surface and the finish of that paint, right? Most of the time, we want to avoid reflections, don't we? And this is a handy little chart here for different, door trim and walls and which rooms, kind of which finish to use. But most of the time, we want to avoid that type of reflection, unless, of course, we're doing some incredible designs like this, and we are then selecting that high sheen, which I think is beautiful because it does allow us to go to some of those darker colors, which may otherwise be a little overpowering, because then with the high sheen, it's also reflective and it's reflecting light. Aren't those beautiful? Of course, every paint company that we work with is going to have a wonderful toolkit for designers. So be sure and talk to your paint reps to get the tools that you need for your clients. What I was taught when I became certified as a color consultant is, so this is interesting, less than 10% of all the colors in the typical color deck are never mixed. So what I was taught, I take my traditional paint deck tools and I reduce those down to about 200, 250 color swatches. This is actually an image of one of my decks here that I use as my go-to colors. And I don't always take the full deck to the client. I only take the ones that are in my special pile. When I'm doing color consulting, and I don't mean when I'm just going out and doing a paint color selecting. When I say color consulting, I'm color consulting when I'm going to the showrooms with a kitchen client and picking out colors for a kitchen, okay? That's still considered color consulting. When I'm doing that day where we're picking out materials and colors, I will wear gray. Try not to wear red or yellows or green. Just wear gray, black, or white. I prefer gray. I also have a felt pad that I put on the table that I use to put my samples on because we know now that how much color affects the color that we're selecting. And when I say a holistic selection process and holistic color consulting, we've touched on all of these today, from the light source, their daylight source, what kind of control over the lighting do they have. Here in the Northwest, I have a lot of green outside my windows, and that green reflects on the walls inside, and it will change that yellow, that beautiful yellow on the sample, into a very muddy yellow, and that's not a happy phone call to get from clients. As you're picking out all your materials and gathering everything together, you need to be very conscientious that there is such a thing as undertones, especially with woods. But there are a lot of things. So wood we're going to talk about here in a minute. And you can see in this image, and this is something that I learned with Business of Color, that there are red undertones, there are green undertones. Yes, even in wood we have green undertones. There is a blue undertone and yellow, and we need to understand that as we are selecting or selecting stains for an existing hardwood, because it could really clash at the end, and we don't want that. Don't forget your fifth wall. Don't forget that fifth wall. Just make sure your paint on the ceiling matches your undertone. A really light ceiling will attract attention, and I don't always want the ceiling to have attention, right? Unless these two images, you might want to look at the ceiling. A darker color can help bring the eye back down into the room where we really want to exist and want to feel there. In the bathrooms, I almost always paint the ceilings the same color. And often, I will just take the ceiling paint as a lighter shade of the wall color. Now on soffits, there actually is a correct and incorrect, depending on who you talk to, correct or incorrect way of doing it. The image on the left, that soffit in the window area, we have painted that the same color as the wall color. This soffit ceiling here should not be white. It should be the same color as your wall color. I'm using the image on the right as an incorrect way of doing it. The underneath part of that lower soffit is painted the ceiling color instead of the wall color, and we really do prefer that it's the wall color. There is a myth, and there's a lot of confusion in talking about how do I make a room feel brighter or lighter or excuse me, bigger? How do I make a room feel bigger? Let's just paint it a lighter color, right? Well, it's not entirely true. It really is more about cool and warm. Remember, we looked at that on the color wheel, cool and warm colors. Warm colors tend to draw in, making the walls feel closer, and cool colors make it recede. So it's going to make the room feel a little bit bigger. And you all know white is not just white, right? Don't let your painter just choose their favorite paint, pure bright white paint that they used on the last job site, okay? Don't let them do that. You need to pick out that white, because the undertone is incredibly important. Many paint companies now have really good sample options so that you can test these colors in your clients' homes. Please do not just paint a swatch on top of a green or on top of another color. Paint it on a board, and a large, like 3x3 board, and move it around in the house for the different lighting. If you're painting over an existing paint, that paint is going to bleed through, and it's going to change how the paint sample looks. So the process of doing the samples in the house is incredibly important. And just wrapping up here, some quick tips and facts just to take away, and then I'll share my resource slide and we'll get to your questions today. In children's rooms, I kind of touched on this earlier, I would really prefer to choose softer, calmer colors that will help with sleep. Keep the bright colors to their toys and accessories. I actually had a lavender bedroom for a long time, and I can't tell you, I just had some of the best sleep in that house. Bathrooms, really be mindful for how that color reflects on your skin. If it doesn't make your skin look good, you probably don't want to paint that color in the bathroom. Hallways, keep it to one color. Kitchens, of course, do we want to increase that appetite or decrease that appetite? That's up to you and your clients, right? Okay, in closing, I really enjoy this. I'm going to read this and we'll get the questions. An architectural colorist is able to successfully create and affect environments that nurture, energize, and comfort. From residential dwellings to healthcare facilities, principles of architectural color design really puts the color and the client, in the center of the purpose. It's all about our client. It's critical that we understand completely the psychological and physiological impact of color. And it's an interdisciplinary process which cannot be satisfied or expressed only through aesthetic design considerations. It encompasses scientific and artistic disciplines. So I think that wraps our day up beautifully here. So I was certified by the Business of Color with Teresa Chulio. There are several other organizations that also do certifications. The images on the right, of course, are just resources that I use today for creating this content for you. Don't forget, NKBA has their specialty badge program, and I worked on the color badge last year with NKBA, and so it's a great, if you're not ready to go commit to having, becoming a color consultant, this NKBA specialty badge is a beautiful addition to your AKBD, CKDs, the other badges that you have after your name. So please do look into that. And again, Amarok, thank you so much for your sponsorship for today. Really appreciate it. And let's get to some of those questions today, Debbie.
Okay, Paula. And yes, thank you, Peter Wells and Amarok, for sponsoring all of our webinars this month. And I want to just say, in case you have to leave early, I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. And so we do have a couple of questions that have come in, Paula. Someone asked, how should we address the color of a living room wall in which a lot of the client's artwork will hang?
Oh, that's beautiful. See, so much of us, we want to don't be afraid of color, don't be afraid of color, you got to do color. If there's there is a time and a place we need to go neutral. And that time is going to be when there's artwork. So we need to take something really neutral on the walls where there's a lot of art, because you want the art to stand out. The paint is a supporting actor in this element, right? So it needs to be about the art. So I would go to the neutral palette, what works with the undertones of the rest of the materials, whether it's carpet or flooring or, primary furniture that's going on in the house. So I would keep it neutral and be really careful of the undertones. Is most of the undertone on the art, are they warm tones? Are there yellow undertones? You might want to stick with that. You don't want a cool undertone behind all the art if it's a warm art palette.
Okay. And then someone's saying when you were talking about the full spectrum paint, something new to this person? And is it just a luxury technique, or would one use this often?
Full spectrum is a beautiful, very complex paint, and there is Divine Paint, Faro and Ball. Benjamin Moore has one, and you need to get more samples, and you need to try the samples. It's even more important to see the samples in the home, because they're so much more complex that they are going to be greatly affected by the light and the other colors in the room. But they are beautiful. And again, they don't have black, so they reflect differently. I would definitely give Benjamin Moore or even Divine Color a call and to learn more from your paint rep.
Okay. Let's see. And someone was asking, what color felt pad do you use for picking colors?
Gray. I use gray. Gray is my favorite. Now, I've seen black felt pads, but when we went through that exercise, you can see how I want to be as neutral as possible. And so I use gray, and I wear gray.
Yes, I heard you say that. Okay, let's see. How often do you take into consideration your client's culture, their first language, etc.? I'm wondering if you find that more important to consider when a client is living in a region different from where they grew up.
So important. Yes, absolutely. I mean, that should be one of the first things that we are, as we're learning about our clients in the very beginning, do we have a universal design issue? Do we have cultural background that we want to come into play? Because red to them may mean something completely different to us. So please, yes, that should always be at the first and foremost, understanding, their culture and how they want to surround them. I had a client where we used color palette I've never used before. And it was totally from, where she grew up. So absolutely.
Okay. So if you're renovating a complete floor of a home, how can you check how the color will look with everything, like the lighting, the new windows, etc.? Any tips on that?
I would do a large, like a 3x3 paint sample, a large, like a 3x3 at least, and do it either. Don't just do it on a piece of plywood, because plywood has a warm undertone and it's going to bleed through. Okay, so do it on a white or a gray board. Paint 2 coats, so you've got a good solid covering. And then move that around the house during different days, time of the days, where you're getting morning light, afternoon light. Is it the dining room light? If you're mixing incandescent and LED lights, you need to move that sample around the space. And not just during one time of the day. It needs to be during multiple times of the day, because it will change.
Okay, that sounds like they'll be spending a lot of time with their clients.
Yep.
So here's an interesting one. If there's a flower printed sofa that a client really loves, which color from that would be best for open concept living room?
So most floral fabric pattern, I mean, you have to see it to be able to really understand, but most of those, there's a background color usually. There's still usually like a background color. I kind of want to know what that background color was. It's like the art. Like, what do you want to stand out? Do you want the flower, colors of the flower to stand out? Or do you want it to diminish? You know, maybe you don't want so much attention to it. So I would look at what the background color is, stay with the same undertone, and find kind of maybe there's a neutral. If you're really wanting that to stand out as your art piece, I would treat it as an art piece. If there's a red petal in the flower, I don't necessarily know that I would go full-blown red unless it's in the dining room and they want to increase the appetite.
Good point. So someone was just throwing in here, and you were talking about your 3x3 board for the paint and the 2 coats. Someone said a small piece of drywall is perfect for the paint sample. So thank you for that.
Yep, that is good.
Yep. And then so getting back to that about this completing a floor or renovating a complete floor. So the person wants to know, in addition, so what if you have to do some color selection on cabinets, etc.? So how does that affect the other paint surfaces? Any ideas on that?
So yes, absolutely. And that's where we have to look at it holistically. When we're looking at all these samples, I need that cabinet sample there. Is it wood? If it's wood, after today, you know there's different undertones. Is it a cool undertone, a warm undertone, blue, green, red? What is the undertone? That cabinet sample absolutely has to be part of the scenario. You can't just pick some of these things out randomly. If you're doing if they're new cabinets, of course, you should be able to get a sample. If you're keeping the existing cabinets, you know, take a door off of your client's cabinet and take it with you when you go pick out tile and whatnot. Yeah, you need that in there.
That's interesting. It brings up a thought that I had. I wanted to match. I had a table that I wanted to match to a certain piece of furniture, and the company actually matched the stain of the furniture for me. So just thought I'd throw that in, because I brought them a drawer from the piece of furniture. So that was kind of cool. Mm-hmm. So good point on that. Thank you for that. And let's see. So talking about the undertone, someone's asking, what's the easiest way to determine the undertone of a color? Should all undertones be the same for a house?
Yes, I do believe that undertones should be consistent through a house, or at least through a main floor. Of course, if there's a paint color that connects the two, then then maybe you are looking at the whole home. I do believe, and I was taught when I got certified, that the undertones should always be consistent throughout a home.
Okay, that's really good to know. So there's someone's asking, what is a color correction light? They don't know what that is.
Oh dear, where's Doug Walter?
Right?
Okay, I'd have to dig into my lighting color classes.
That's fine.
We can ask Doug and get back to you.
Sure. And there might be a way to maybe Google that and find out, right?
Or there's somebody sitting on this call right now. Yeah,
I don't know. Let's see. So, and then there's another question here. When you were talking earlier about bathrooms, is there a best color palette for bathrooms for those skin tones you were talking about?
So we all have different skin tones, don't we? I do not look good in greens or gray walls. It makes me look washed out, right? So I prefer warmer tones. I even still prefer warmer light colors too for my skin type. So again, we go back to your client. What's there? Remember when we used to do the what color are we? Are we autumn? Are we spring? Are we, with what makeup and clothes we wore, right? We do need to see what our client looks best in. And sometimes they don't know. I will see people wear gray, and I'll include myself in that sometimes, where I shouldn't wear gray because it washes me out, and other people look beautiful in gray. Okay. So, yeah.
Good. So someone put in here when we were talking about the color, they suggested to use Adobe Color Analyst. It says it will take a photo of your room and point out different options to pick a color from the furniture or the room. So it's color.adobe.com, create color wheel, etc. So thank you.
That's a great tool. I know I use Sherwin-Williams Color Snap app as well. I can take a photo. In fact, I just posted one this last week on social media where I took a photo with the app, and then it told me all of their paint colors that it found in that image, which was a lot of fun. I love that.
Great. And so someone was saying when we were talking about undertones, they said hold the samples against a paper white background to make the undertones obvious.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thank you for that.
And then it does start becoming more obvious when you start putting them next to, it becomes like the more we practice this, and I didn't know any of this until I went and got certified as a architectural consultant for color. I had no idea. Undertone, what? I didn't know what that was. But when you start practicing with putting these colors side by side and next to it, the more you do it, the more you will see, oh, there's the blue undertone, there's the green, and it will start becoming second nature.
Okay, good suggestion. Here's a question about any suggestions for a go-to color or paint water ratio for whitewashing brick on an existing fireplace.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah.
I would probably call my Sherwin-Williams rep, and or I might even go back to the source and call Teresa, who certified me. So what I do know is I am a kitchen and bath designer. That's my day job. I appreciate my certification for color consulting, but I'm probably not, I know my limitations. I know that I'm not out there doing color consulting with paint, 24/7 like traditional color consultants are. So I know when I get a certain type of client that is really complex, really wants a lot more than what I can do, I know I even still will have to call a traditional color consultant to come in and work with me. Even though I've gotten this education, I do still know my limits. Same is true with lighting. I know enough to put together a really great kitchen, but you ask me one of those questions, I'm like, where's Doug?
Right, so you need your specialist.
Yeah.
Good point. So I know we're kind of running out of time, and I just want to put this other question out there because I think it's interesting. Is there a proper way to use different color walls in one room? Any thoughts on that?
So you have like an accent color. It's all going to depend on where's the window, where's the daylight coming from. Do you want that different color to do you want to draw attention to it? Usually if we're using a different color, it's something where it's like an accent wall, right? We're wanting to accent it. That's hard to answer outside of the box of knowing the rest of the parameters of that room. I don't do as many accent walls as I used to. Yeah, I haven't done an accent wall in a long time.
Okay, that's good. So then there's just one final question when we're getting back to this, when we're trying to match colors with like wood and base things like that. So what if the person had like an oak floor or walnut island and that was being custom stained by a contractor or millwork shop? So would you get the stain to match one of those wood tones or select a color that the client liked? Or I guess it varies, right?
So if it's red oak, it's going to have a yellow and or red undertone. Walnut I've seen walnut with a red undertone, but it's definitely not as red as oak. If they both have a warm undertone, that's going to be easier. Oak, if you're wanting to stain it to match the cabinets or stain it to match the floor, that's tricky. I would have them both, like the cabinets and or the floor, like do samples of different stains.
Okay.
Yeah, you're getting into some beyond 101 color work there.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Paula, for all this great information, and all of you out in the audience. And once again, thanking AMROC for their generous sponsorship for today's session. And again, thank you, Paula. This has been great. Really appreciate that you're supporting our programming here. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you. Thanks,
You're
Beer.
welcome.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.